Let's discuss federal organizations. We also need to be aware of several federal organizations overseeing regulations in the United States, including the NRC, NCRP, FDA, the EPA, OSHA, NRC BEIR, and the NIH. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission was established by Congress in 1974. It functions to ensure safe use of radioactive materials for beneficial civilian purposes while protecting people and the environment. Nuclear power plants and nuclear medicine is regulated through the NRC through licensing, inspection, and enforcement, which focus on research reactors, storage of radioactive materials, and waste disposal. It also establishes dose limit guidelines, licensing requirements, and rules for safe use of radioactive materials. It's important to note that the NRC does not regulate or inspect imaging facilities. It does, however, enforce regulations involving the Title X Code of Federal Regulations, Part 19, for training requirements of radiation workers, dose limits for radiation workers, and Title X, Part 20, pertaining to maintaining a radiation worker dose history database. The National Council on Radiation Protection and Measurements was originally established in 1929, then chartered by Congress in 1964. It developed over 150 scientific reports, several of which are being cited in this course, and its rules and regulations have been published in the Title X Code of Federal Regulations. The NCRP's main role is to advise state and federal regulators on radiation protection issues and concerns. It collects, analyzes, and distributes data and regulations about radiation protection, quantities, and measurements. The most current reports take a look at image-guided interventional medical procedures and CT examinations, and they provide recommendations for imaging protocols, managing procedure times, and equipment dose reduction techniques. They have formed a legal agreement with state governments to license and regulate radioisotope usage for nuclear medicine. And it's also important to note that imaging professionals are responsible for staying up to date on current issues and NCRP reports and recommendations. The United States Food and Drug Administration is typically considered responsible for regulating food and drugs, but in 1968, the Radiation Control for Health and Safety Act, Public Law 90-602, created the Center for Devices and Radiological Health, the CDRH, and extended the FDA's roles to include issues related to radiation protection. Under this law, the FDA regulates the design and manufacturing of electronic products and medical devices included in diagnostic X-ray equipment. Public Law 90-602 ensures that the public is protected from hazards of unnecessary radiation exposure. The Environmental Protection Agency was established in 1970 by President Richard Nixon to facilitate the development and enforcement of regulations pertaining to the control of radiation in the environment. It has the authority for specific areas such as determining the action level for radon. OSHA is a monitoring agency with regard to hazards in the workplace, regulating occupational exposure to radiation and mandates an employee's right to know about possible workplace dangers. This includes hazardous substances, infectious agents, and ionizing and non-ionizing radiation. The National Research Council Committee on Biological Effects of Ionizing Radiation is an advisory research group that assesses risk. Their 1990 report stated that risk to radiation exposure was 3 to 4 times greater than previously estimated. The IRCP reduced their annual occupational dose limit as a result of this report, which was BEIR 5. The most current report, BEIR 7, supports a linear non-threshold risk model. The National Institutes of Health initially began in 1887 as a one-room lab within the Marine Hospital Service. It is now a division of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services As the largest biomedical research agency in the world, it conducts federally funded medical research in 27 institutes and influences regulations and practices relating to imaging equipment. The NIH has successfully established a series of steps to improve the tracking of patient radiation exposures and requires equipment vendors to include radiation dose tracking technologies.